I was born at Te Kaupuru in the Northern Wairau. We lived at Ray here in the hill country just out of Ruwai Flats. Both my grandparents have been carry bushmen. Bill Brown worked in the area there around the farm, and Bill Carter, he was my grandfather. He worked in the bush in several places, but he was up at the Onleys Crossing and close to the Waipua Forest working carry up there. My uncle Keith, who's mum's brother, had been a carry bushman, and he used to always talk about the stories in the bush, and so always had that background. So when I started wood chopping in 1978, it must have been, I was in Perth, West Australia. There was an old guy, Fred Woodbridge, was showing someone else how to chop, and I said I was interested. He showed me the basics of how to cut an underhand block, which is how most young axemen should start. The following year they had their 150th anniversary Perth Royal Show, and the New Zealand team were over and they were one man short, and they asked me if I'd compete in there. So I thought I was pretty good getting into the New Zealand team after 1 year's wood chopping. I talked to the New Zealand guys and they said, oh, Rowan is the biggest chop up here on the circuit, and so I went there. They made me president straight away, so I've been president there for 10 years, and we had some very good carnivals at Rowan. We used to get 50 or 60 axemen there in the 1980s. We started putting on $1,000 chops, and when you put on $1,000 chops, you get axemen coming out of the woodwork. We spent a fortnight getting blocks out of Linwright's Mountain just up here on the hills, all triery, and we went up there every day for 14 days and we got over 1,000 blocks out. The hardwoods are often free cutting. You don't make the penetration as much, but you don't have to pull the axe out, and it's not as hard a work. Northland's been renowned for standing block cutters. They used to have 3 or 4 standing cuts and 1 underhand event, so naturally you're not going to get many underhand cutters. I was better at underhand because I think when I was left school and was working with Dad, we split a lot of puri strainer posts and did a lot of that type of work, and it was all down underneath work with a heavy maul. And plus I'd been shearing too, which is sort of under downward work. So when you get a block and you're looking to cut a good underhand block, you look at the top of the block when it's standing up and you see how the grain is, and you set the block how you think you can cut it best. But you try to have your best wood in the front and put a big front in, and then turn around the back and finish the harder wood on the back. If you're going to be a competitive axeman, you've got to learn the technique of setting your block up so that you cut the scarf out the first side and then go around the other side and cut it off so you're not cutting dead wood. The Northland circuit was a great feature we had in Northland. All the axemen from down south would come up and compete in Northland over the summer holiday period, but we had probably 30 axemen in the north then. We'd have all the people come and they'd stay in at Pangaroo and Miti Miti and Horiki, all in and around this Hokianga area, because all the boats, the harbour was the centre, the access of the whole harbour, of the whole district. The axemen would have a picnic down at New Year's Day. They'd have a dance at the hall, they'd have a hangi meal, and New Year's Day they'd have some chopping carnivals and some running races on the beach when the tide was out, tug of war. But the most hard-fought event was the Maori woman's chopping race. There was a bag of rice, a big sack of rice and husbands would get their wives there, and they'd really get them cracked up, and there was a huge amount of effort went into cutting that block. But it's changed now, that's moving down to closer to Auckland, and I think that's where the strength of it will be in the future, because the population's there and there's a lot of city people who have this bright idea that wood chopping, is something they want to be part of. Yeah, there's not a lot of chops in the north now. We're still getting 25 or 30 axemen coming, so we're still functioning. It was about 2 years before we talked about it and decided that we needed to celebrate our 100th anniversary, so that's when we put on a big chop for that day. It was a great day for the community, A huge number of people come to watch, and it was good. What it is that makes a good axeman, I'm not quite sure. You need to be certainly strong enough to swing an axe, but you need to have some other things going for you to be a good one. a lot of different axemen around. There's big tall ones and little short ones, and they all cut wood pretty well.